This is Section 1 of the $30,000 Bequest and Other Stories by Mark Twain. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. The $30,000 Bequest and Other Stories by Mark Twain. The $30,000 Bequest, Chapter 1. Lakeside was a pleasant little town of 5,000 or 6,000 inhabitants, and rather a pretty one, too, as towns go in the far West. It had church accommodations for 35,000, which is the way of the far West and the South, where everybody is religious, and where each of the Protestant sects is represented and has a plant of its own. Rank was unknown in Lakeside, unconfessed anyway. Everybody knew everybody and his dog, and a sociable friendliness was the prevailing atmosphere. Saladin Foster was bookkeeper in the principal store, and the only high-salaried man of his profession in Lakeside. He was 35 years old now. He had served that store for 14 years. He had begun in his marriage week at $400 a year, and had climbed steadily up $100 a year for 4 years. From that time forth his wage had remained $800, a handsome figure indeed, and everybody conceded that he was worth it. His wife, Electra, was a capable helpmeet, although, like himself, a dreamer of dreams and a private dabbler in romance. The first thing she did after her marriage, child as she was, aged only 19, was to buy an acre of ground on the edge of the town, and pay down the cash for it, $25, all her fortune. Saladin had less by 15. She instituted a vegetable garden there, got it farmed on shares by the nearest neighbor, and made it pay her 100% a year. Out of Saladin's first year's wage she put $30 in the savings bank, 60 out of his second, 100 out of his third, 150 out of his fourth. His wage went to $800 a year then, and meantime 2 children had arrived and increased the expenses, but she banked $200 a year from the salary nevertheless, thenceforth. When she had been married 7 years, she built and furnished a pretty and comfortable $2,000 house in the midst of her garden acre, paid half of the money down, and moved her family in. 7 years later she was out of debt and had several $100s out, earning its living. Earning it by the rise in landed estate, for she had long ago bought another acre or two and sold the most of it at a profit to pleasant people who were willing to build, and would be good neighbors and furnish a general comradeship for herself and her growing family. She had an independent income, from safe investments, of about $100 a year. Her children were growing in years and grace, and she was a pleased and happy woman. Happy in her husband, happy in her children, and the husband and the children were happy in her. It is at this point that this history begins. The youngest girl, Clytemnestra, called Clytie for short, was 11. Her sister, Gwendolen, called Gwen for short, was 13. Nice girls, and comely. The names betray the latent romance tinge in the parental blood. The parents' names indicate that the tinge was an inheritance. It was an affectionate family, hence all 4 of its members had pet names. Saladin's was a curious and unsexing one, Sally, and so was Electra's, Aleck. All day long Sally was a good and diligent bookkeeper and salesman. All day long Aleck was a good and faithful mother and housewife, and thoughtful and calculating business woman. But in the cozy living-room at night they put the plodding world away, and lived in another and a fairer, reading romances to each other, dreaming dreams, comrading with kings and princes and stately lords and ladies in the flash and stir and splendor of noble palaces and grim and ancient castles. End of Chapter 1 of the $30,000 Bequest. This is Section 2 of the $30,000 Bequest and Other Stories by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The $30,000 Bequest by Mark Twain, Chapter 2. Now came great news, stunning news, joyous news, in fact. It came from a neighboring state where the family's only surviving relative lived. It was Sally's relative, a sort of vague and indefinite uncle or second or third cousin by the name of Tilbury Foster, 70, and a bachelor, reputed well off, and correspondingly sour and crusty. Sally had tried to make up to him once, by letter, in a bygone time, and had not made that mistake again. Tilbury now wrote to Sally, saying he should shortly die, and should leave him $30,000 cash, not for love, but because money had given him most of his troubles and exasperations, and he wished to place it where there was good hope that it would continue its malignant work. The bequest would be found in his will, and would be paid over, provided that Sally should be able to prove to the executors that he had taken no notice of the gift by spoken word or by letter, had made no inquiries concerning the moribund's progress toward the everlasting tropics, and had not attended the funeral. As soon as Aleck had partially recovered from the tremendous emotions created by the letter, she sent to the relative's habitat and subscribed for the local paper. Man and wife entered into a solemn compact, now, to never mention the great news to any one while the relative lived, lest some ignorant person carry the fact to the death-bed and distort it and make it appear that they were disobediently thankful for the bequest, and just the same as confessing it and publishing it right in the face of the prohibition. For the rest of the day Sally made havoc and confusion with his books, and Aleck could not keep her mind on her affairs, not even take up a flower-pot, or book, or a stick of wood, without forgetting what she had intended to do with it. For both were dreaming. $30,000! All day long the music of those inspiring words sang through those people's heads. From his marriage day forth, Aleck's grip had been upon the purse, and Sally had seldom known what it was to be privileged to squander a dime on non-necessities. $30,000! The song went on, a vast sum, an unthinkable sum. All day long Aleck was absorbed in planning how to invest it, Sally in planning how to spend it. There was no romance reading that night. The children took themselves away early, for their parents were silent, distraught, and strangely unentertaining. The good-night kisses might as well have been impressed upon vacancy, for all the response they got. The parents were not aware of the kisses, and the children had been gone an hour before their absence was noticed. 2 pencils had been busy during that hour, note-making in the way of plans. It was Sally who broke the stillness at last. He said, with exultation, "Ah, it'll be grand, Aleck! Out of the first 1,000 we'll have a horse and a buggy for summer, and a cutter and a skin lap-robe for winter." Aleck responded with decision and composure, "Out of the capital? Nothing of the kind. Not if it was $1,000,000." Sally was deeply disappointed. The glow went out of his face. "Oh, Aleck," he said, reproachfully, "we've always worked so hard and been so scrimped, and now that we are rich it does seem—" He did not finish, for he saw her eye soften. His supplication had touched her. She said, with gentle persuasiveness, "We must not spend the capital, dear, it would not be wise. Out of the income from it—" "That will answer, that will answer, Aleck. How dear and good you are! There will be a noble income, and if we can spend that—" "Not all of it, dear, not all of it, but you can spend a part of it—that is, a reasonable part, but the whole of the capital, every penny of it, must be put right to work and kept at it. You see the reasonableness of that, don't you?" "Why, yes, yes, of course. But we'll have to wait so long, 6 months before the first interest falls due." "Yes, maybe longer." "Longer, Aleck? Why? Don't they pay half yearly?" "That kind of investment, yes, but I sha'n't invest in that way." "What way, then?" "For big returns." "Big? That's good. Go on, Aleck. What is it?" "Coal. The new mines. Canal. I mean to put in 10,000, ground floor. When we organize
We'll get 3 shares for one."
By George, but it sounds good, Aleck. Then the shares will be worth how much, and when?
"About a year. They'll pay 10%, half yearly, and be worth 30,000. I know all about it. The advertisement is in the Cincinnati paper here."
Land! 30,000 for 10, in a year. Let's jam in the whole capital and pull out 90. I'll write and subscribe right now. Tomorrow it may be too late." He was flying to the writing desk, but Aleck stopped him and put him back in his chair. She said,
"Don't lose your head so. We mustn't subscribe till we've got the money. Don't you know that?"
Sally's excitement went down a degree or two, but he was not wholly appeased. "Why, Aleck, we'll have it, you know, and so soon, too. He's